Okay, that's looking pretty good. Just going to soften that out a little bit. You won't be able to see this backside, like I said, till later on. I'm going to remove this off the easel and bring it around for you so you can actually get a better view of all that. Okay. I'm going to take my fan brush. This is the one I had earlier. It's my number 3. Now, obviously, I do have a much bigger fan brush in the line, too. Quite a considerably sized bigger. If I was working on a bigger canvas, that would be the one I would use. So you scale your brushes to kind of to where you're working. I'm going to start with a little bit of white, a little sap green, a little bit of the ultramarine blue. I want a distant green color. Distant means that I'm going to have it be a lighter value. Now see, I started with white and I put the green and the blue into that. If I wanted to gray that ever so slightly, I could put a little touch of the burnt sienna with that. My foreground greens are going to be much richer and much darker. But for right now, to make this look distant, I want to go with a lighter value. That is atmospheric perspective, or sometimes called aerial perspective. They're the same thing, but they go by different names. If I just take the corner of the brush and literally just, let me slow this down for you. I'm just stirring little circular strokes. In my mind's eye, I'm seeing something that maybe looks like this. That's just what I'm seeing as far as an outline of treetops. So I just kind of go with it. And the nice part is there's really no right or wrong with it, as long as you get some variation in it and don't do the same thing throughout. It's going to be a nice suggestion of some treetops. I'm going to come back here in a moment with my mop brush and soften this out against the sky. You'll see that it makes it look a little more distant. Now see, I could have gone much darker with this, but I didn't want to. If I'd have gone too dark, it doesn't make this area recede. Soft edges will recede and lighter values will recede. I'm making this lighter than what I know my foreground is going to be, ultimately. And if I come back in and soften this edge against the sky, and I keep it lighter, these trees are going to look a long ways away by the time I get the foreground in here. So when you're painting, you have to consider all that. Even though I'm only working back here, I have it set in my mind, kind of what I'm going to do in the foreground, and I'm gauging this value and these edges by what I'm going to do in the foreground. So it helps to have it thought out ahead a little bit. Not to say that I can't switch gears and change my mind here and there, because I can. Okay, now I'm going to take my mop brush. This is a wonderful brush for blending, softening edges. Sometimes I blend my clouds in big areas with it too. Fantastic little brush. Now notice I've got a paper towel in my hand. I'm going to wipe the brush off as I proceed, but I'm just kind of fluffing that up. Now I want you to look at this area as compared to where I haven't blended yet. I'm just going to do a little swath across here 4 or 5 inches. See how that blurs that out of focus as compared to the hard edge? That makes that look farther away. So I just want to lose that against the skyline. And see, I'm just doing a little circular stroke. I want it to get a little blurry and a little fuzzy looking. This is where my students get really antsy and they say, well, I'm ruining it, it's smeary and it's blurry. I'm doing that intentionally. I want it to look smeary and blurry. Look how far away that looks. It's out of focus. That's kind of what we know in the business is depth of field. When I put these other trees in the foreground, this is really going to be dramatic. You're going to have a lot of depth across this body of water. When you're painting, all you're trying to do is show depth on a flat surface where there is no depth. This canvas is 12 inches high and 16 inches wide, but there's no depth really. You know, we got the 1.5 inch thickness because it's a bevel canvas, but really there's no depth to speak of on it. We're trying to make that look like that's a couple 100 yards across there. Okay, I'm going to come back with that same color, and from that shoreline down, I'm going to pull vertical strokes. Vertical strokes will always look kind of reflective and glassy. So notice I'm pulling straight down. Now these are going to get softened in and blended too. They're going to look very harsh for the time being, so hang on. Don't get too far ahead of me here. Patience is a virtue, especially when painting. Let's see, this is the type of painting that anybody can do. I'm not necessarily drawing. I'm just making shapes with brushes, and it takes a little bit of practice, but as I said before, a very minimal amount of practice will show a great result. You proceed rapidly with this approach. Okay. See, I'm trying to mimic the symmetry of what's above. If these trees are taller, I'm bringing the reflection a little lower, and vice versa. I'm not really knocking myself out with it, as you can see, because I know it's going to get kind of smeared and blurry. So I'm not trying to match everything absolutely 100%, but I'm coming very close as I can get. I'm going to go back with my mop brush, just wipe it off a little bit, and I further pull that straight down, just from the horizon line down, and see it's really distorting that and blurring it out of focus. And now we have a tree line and a shoreline and some nice reflections in there. See how nice that looks? It's going to look even nicer once I put the foreground in. All right, I'm going to take my small painting knife. I'll take a little bit of titanium white off my palette. I'm going to pull this out in a very flat little puddle, a smear I should say. Wipe the blade off, and because I'm right-handed, I'm going to be using the top side of that. If you're left-handed, you'd be holding it this way more than likely, but you'd still, the idea is the same. You'd still be using the top edge of that. So I'm just going to cut off a little sliver like that, right on the edge of that blade. And I want to put a few little shimmers and sparkles on the water back here. If we put a little bit of movement in the water, it looks more like water. Now obviously, the more of this I do, the more surface is on the water, the more it's agitated, maybe the wind's blowing across it or whatever. So you want it if you want it very soft and calm, still water, you just don't put as much of this. It doesn't require a lot. You'll see that just by putting a little bit on here makes a big difference. It kind of puts a surface across the top of it so it conveys the feeling of water a little better to the viewer. You want to make sure these are quite parallel to the bottom of the canvas so they can't be going uphill and downhill and all over the place. Notice I'm parallel to the horizon line and to the bottom edge of the canvas here for the most part. Anything that lays flat, whether it's a body of water or the floor of a interior scene you're painting or a road, anything that lays flat, you paint it flat. Okay, now that should give you the idea for that. So like I said, the more you put, the more action you're going to have on your water. I want more emphasis in the middle, but since this is a bevel edge wraparound, let's work a couple of these over here too, just so we got some continuity around the edges. I'll still have more emphasis here, but you can't overlook these edges. That's why we have them designed this way. So you want to incorporate those into your painting no matter what it is you're painting, whatever your subject happens to be. All right. This will be very three-dimensional when I'm all done. Okay, I'm going to build it up a little busier here in the center. This is going to kind of start setting up somewhat of a focal point. You'll see that once I get this in here and I get a little more activity, a little more lightness in there, lighter value. See how it's kind of drawing your eye towards the center of the canvas, which is exactly where I want to lead you. You and anybody else who happens to look at this painting. Always think about your focal point and your center of interest and try to lead your viewer to it. Lighter values and harder edges will always be king. They are the elements that are always going to lead the viewer where you want them to look. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Like I said, I don't want it too busy because I want this to look far away. Which brings me to basically the whole gist of what this painting is about. I told you we're going to do deciduous or leaf trees. I'm going to use this 1-inch scenery brush. The main reason I asked for these brushes to have the bevel, now this one's the same thing, just bigger. If I was working on a bigger canvas, I would use the larger brush. And I could actually use that on this one, but I think it'll be easier to scale it down to the smaller brush for this. The reason I asked for the bevel on this is that I can take the brush like this and load just the tips of those bristles like that. Now I'm gonna